Well, hello there all you absolutely magnificent people, and welcome back to Nightingale. My name is Will, this is An Ecologist Plays, a channel where we talk about nature while playing games. And hey, if that sounds like something you would like to see more of, there are lots of videos on the channel, so go check them out and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Now, today we are going to go to the Abeyance Site of Power right over there. We're going to get rid of whatever is hiding in there, and then we're hopefully going to go to Sylvan's Cradle. But before we do that, let's just quickly take a quick nap. And now that we are nice and refreshed, we are ready to set off to the Site of Power. Of course, each of these realms do have one of these sites that you need to clear, and they'd be guarded by some kind of bigger, nastier creature. So let's go have a look and see. I believe this Site of Power has the Jabberwock, so we'll talk about that one when we actually get to the depths of the Site of Power. Now, as we are making our way down there, I have gotten some food that gives me a lot of health and stamina and regen of those two things as well. Currently, you'll see there our stamina is 110 and our health is 200. If I eat some of these mixed plants, which consist of tomato and coffee together, that takes our stamina up to 140 and our health up to 220. And then I can eat some leaf-fin soldierfish wasna as well, and that then takes our stamina up to 165 and our health to 245. And that is going to be so useful when we head into that Site of Power. I mean, look at this. We can glide so far without any problems. We actually need to head a bit more to the west, I see. Now, everything we see above ground here is in sunlight. So the whole food web depends on sunlight. I mean, the sunlight will hit the plants photosynthesize, and they produce sugars, and they're the basis of the food web. However, the moment we go underground, well, there's no sunlight down there. So the whole food web then depends on, well, other things. So we'll chat about what the food web will be like in a cave system or in the underground system, like we are going to see in a moment. We just have to jump across here. You know, that's the first time I actually made that jump. The first time. I usually end up falling to the bottom there. Alright, but here we are in the Site of Power. And it looks like there's a barrier, but in fact we can just walk in. Now, the Sites of Power generally also are puzzle areas, and in this case, the puzzle is to push buttons, which, no jokes, is one of my favorite things to do in games. Whenever I do see buttons or something to push, yeah, you betcha I'm going to push those buttons. And in this case, the buttons to push are these little red glyphs to examine. So we just examine a whole bunch of them, and that should open up the area at the bottom there. Alright, I've pushed the buttons. This area is now open. And there's some nice loot at the back here. Oh, we got Titania's crown as well. Now, that is also a very nice plant to start growing at our base. Though, in fact, as far as I recall, Titania's crown is actually a type of fungus. And we'll talk about that when we actually start growing them. I also got lumber of sepplewood, and sepplewood is a nice one to also use in our tier 2 bows, because it will give us a range damage increase. And well, now we just take a portal to the next area. And here we go. Now we are in a cave system, and there is a bit of an opening up here, which is great for the plants growing here. You can see there's quite lush plant growth here, and that's because, well, there is still some sunlight shining down, and this little patch over here that receives sunlight, especially in the middle of the day, it seems, that is a good spot for the plants to grow. It almost seems as though we are pretty much at the equator of this world, with the sun, I'm guessing it's currently midday, the sun actually shining down from directly above. As you move away to further latitudes, so further north or south, away from the equator, if this world works similar to Earth, as you move away from the equator, the sun is going to be moving closer and closer to the horizon rather than directly above you. And that is going to influence how much sunlight this little cave spot would actually get. Now, plants do need sunlight to actually photosynthesize. So as we head into the cave here, this area actually doesn't have any sunlight. So you wouldn't expect green plants to grow here. You would expect perhaps a bit more sun-starved plants, kind of like the ivy or whatever plant this is over here, growing along, creeping along the wall here. You'd start seeing them, what we typically call being anemic. And I have seen some anemic plants in my life. I, for example, have sweet potato growing in a very shady spot at home. And even though they can tolerate some shade, well, too much shade will kill them eventually, and they become very light in color, very much anemic. Alright, now there are some bound here to defeat, and we're just going to start shooting at the heart there, and then just kind of shoot the bound guys here, including Mr. Lamphead there. And there we go. Now I'm sure there would be some more of these spawn areas of the bound. We just have to keep on clearing them and keep moving deeper. There we go, the charger, as I call it, or the kind of very much satyr-like in appearance, with little goat's horns. And then we have another little puzzle area with these obelisks, opening up another area. Now, it does seem as though there is some sun shining down from above here. So this is giving the plants some sunlight, but they would need to be adapted to life in the undergrowth. So you have some ferns here. Now, ferns are often found in forested environments, so they very often can handle shady conditions. Not all species, though. Some species do still need a lot of sunlight. Bracken fern, for example, which is a very common fern in most parts of the world, they do best in sunny conditions. Oh, apparently we've got the more bound popping up here. They're shooting the lampies. The lampreys. Let's call them lampreys. Oh, enter charges. Hello, charges. Here, we now need to stand in these areas and actually lower the glyph area over here, the marking here. And if we do that for all 3 areas, while the enemies are also spawning and coming towards us, and change all 3 blue, then we unlock the next area. There we go. Alright, but notice here, very little plant growth right over here, indicating that there's not enough sunlight for them to actually grow, for plants to actually grow here. Over here, there's a little bit of sunlight still, and I'm guessing that's why there is still some greenery here. But as we move deeper in, there's most likely not going to be enough sunlight to actually sustain plant growth. Like here, you wouldn't expect plant growth. Instead, you would expect to find either plants that are parasitic on the plants that are over there, or maybe just the roots creeping down from plants that are above ground there, or you'll find plants that aren't photoautotrophic. In other words, they don't photosynthesize, they don't produce their own food through photosynthesis. Instead, they are chemoautotrophs. They produce food through chemical reactions by breaking up sulfurous compounds, etc., etc. Alright, now I do believe we've got the Jabberwock on the other side here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to eat our mixed plants here. And our leaf-fin soldierfish wasnas. And apparently sprain our ankles. And there we go, there is the Jabberwock. Let's just have a quick look at it by running right up to it. You know, what can go wrong? There we go. It is definitely a predatory creature. It's able to jump quite nicely. Oh, it's got a nice tail. It's got spikes on the tail tip there as well. That it will obviously use to actually attack us as well. Very red head, which is very interesting. It could be a form of... Okay, and there we go. It's actually cloning itself, which is very strange. I don't think I know of any creature that's able to actually clone itself. We just need to stay away from those little weird fungi things there. Okay, so that was a clone. Let's try to find the real one, shall we? Okay, this is also a clone. That thing over there, that one over there, this is the real one. So the bright red color there could be to either attract a partner, or it could be to actually use in fights. It does look like a bit more of a swollen head that it could be using to fight other Jabberwock males. It also has jaws that resemble the Predator, you know, from the Predator franchise. The jaws that open up very similar to how we have the Glycerrae of things like the sun spider or camel spider or Solifugus actually opening up. And I think it's going to clone itself again. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so let's just hit the fake one. We'll hit this one again as well. Most likely also a fake one. Yeah. It also does have some ranged attacks, the Jabberwock here. Of course, Jabberwock referring to the creature in Alice in Wonderland as well. There's a Jabberwock there from a nonsense poem. There we go. I don't think we get any loot from the body here. I don't think there is even a body for us to loot. But we will get some loot when we actually go into the next zone. Then we get the Jabberwock loot. But yeah, the Jabberwock, a very interesting little creature here. using ranged attacks, duplicating itself, kind of like asexual reproduction, which is when individuals reproduce without needing another individual to reproduce, so they can just kind of reproduce via splitting or budding, but that would actually result in offspring directly next to you, not, you know, on the other side of an arena, as we just grab our Jabberwock materials here. Now we do, for example, have all over the world, you've got the planarians, which are a type of flatworm, and they can regenerate from any little piece of themselves. They can actually form new individuals, which is makes them very difficult to control. I mean, also there with the Jabberwock, it's difficult to actually, if there are 3 or 4 of them, to actually control them, to actually take them out. So yeah, I would see that Jabberwock cloning itself as a form of asexual reproduction of, you know, literally cloning itself. Alright, we have got the Empyrean knowledge here, which means we have unlocked Sylvan's Cradle. And also, the tier 2 things. Alright, but let's head home, shall we? And well, opening up this portal here will allow us to go to Sylvan's Cradle. But before we do that, I'm just going to travel back to our respite, drop off a bunch of stuff, and then we will go through the portal to Sylvan's Cradle. So I'll see you in a bit. Alrighty, I am back, so let's jump on in here and let's have a look what's happening here in Sylvan's Cradle. Alrighty, here we are. Very different realm, much redder in color, and we do have a bear as well. Now, of course, bears will be predatory. Oh, and there's also, I think, a piggy down there, a wild boar. Alright, now we do want to explore safely, so let's see if we can. There we go. Okay, 1 shot, 1 kill. Painless. Let's see if we can get 2 for 2. A heart should be right there, indeed. Okay, now I don't see any other boars in the area, so that's great news. Of course, nothing goes to waste. But immediately we can see there's something strange happening to the trees here, where there appear to be these knots or burls or some kind of corruption happening here. And I do believe this is corrupted wood, and there's something eating away at it. Now this could be a form of canker, it could be a form of a fungus attacking it, it could be bacterial in nature, but overall this doesn't look good. So there's some kind of infection that needs to be gotten rid of, I guess. And as far as I know, that is what we will be addressing while we are exploring Sylvan's Cradle. But to do that we need civilization, and I do believe there is a little town right below here. Yeah, there we go, just down there. Alright, now Miriam over here has given us some quests that we can do in order to, you know, help the town here. Additionally, it will give us some rewards as well, which is never a bad thing. But there's also, of course, a lovely ring course here, which will give us some nice tier 2 essences. So we're just going to do this. It also leads to the Site of Power. So later on we will be doing the Site of Power, not now, but when we do, this is a nice way to get there quite easily. And there we go. This is the Site of Power in Sylvan's Cradle. Additionally, some extra quests here. Now Desma over here wants us to test a purity potion on a fungus and on a realm spirit, so we'll need to grab some purity potions or make some purity potions and then go test that out. Aha, we need level 25 sickle to harvest these plants here, which we do have, so we can gather some Holt Bloom. Finally, wonderful, we can actually harvest those, no problem. And the nice thing is that there is a fast travel point just above the town here, so one can easily just go up there and then come back down again. Do some crafting at the crafting tables in the village here, and then just carry on with your normal business. Oh, there is hail falling over here. So lovely. I love the effect of the little hailstones hopping on the ground here. Oh, I haven't seen hail in quite a while. So now that we actually have hail falling, how on earth does hail actually form? So you need special conditions for that. You need quite a low temperature, or actually a very cold temperature up there in the atmosphere, but very hot conditions down here, so that hot air can rise up quickly. So what happens is that there'll be moisture forming, there'll be rain forming in the clouds there in the atmosphere. That, of course, as raindrops get larger, they get heavier and they start coming down. But as these little raindrops start coming down closer to the ground level, not too close to ground, but lower down in the atmosphere, the updrafts from the with the hot air rising, will push the little rock droplets back up higher into the atmosphere, where they will freeze. And then they get heavier, and they come down again. And as they come down, they thaw, so they melt a bit, but not completely, but a bit. And then again, they get pushed up by the updrafts. They go higher up, more water forms around them, but they also freeze at the same time. And as more water condenses around them and they freeze a bit more, they start getting heavier and they drop down again. And again, the updraft takes them up, and they refreeze, and they come down, and they refreeze as they go up. And it's a continuous cycle. Each time, a little layer forms in the hailstone. So if you cut through hailstones, it actually has rings similar to the growth rings of trees, showing that it came down closer to the ground, but not to ground level yet, but closer to the ground, and then went up into the atmosphere again. And eventually it just gets so heavy that it can't be taken up by the updrafts, and then you've got hailstones falling from above. Anyway, so that's cool. I do love the fact that we've got hailstones, and the hailstorm has passed. So we can equip our bow again because, well, there are some bandersnatchers up there. And they are, I guess, the main predator in this realm, or the most common predator at least. Bander is an archaic term for a leader. So a bandersnatch could refer to something that hunts the leaders of groups. So something that is not scared of hunting the leaders. It is also a creature from Lewis Carroll's poems. So like the Jabberwock we had earlier, well, the Bandersnatch is another creature from Lewis Carroll's poems. So it shares that origin, and the Bandersnatch is not really described in much detail, but it is a predator. It is a very fast-moving predator with snapping jaws. That's pretty much what we know of the Bandersnatch. And I guess the depiction here in the game is, quite accurate for what I would imagine the Bandersnatch being. You can see here it's quite a lanky creature. It is very agile, and it will jump up at you, and we'll definitely have a better look at them later on. But notice those jaws there, very, very similar to some of the other jaws we have already seen as well. I believe the Jabberwocky had a very similar design with the mouth parts moving, similar to the chelicerae of the sun spider, or solifuge, or camel spider as they're also known. Now we do already have some tier 2 essences, so what we're going to do is we're going to grab the tier 2 workbench here, the refined workbench. And before grabbing anything which you would typically see as useful, we are going to grab the spyglass, because this is going to be a lovely way for us to actually look at some of the creatures we encounter without them attacking us outright. I'm also grabbing the refined axe pick here because it is a very useful tool to actually have. Instead of carrying both an axe and a pickaxe, you can just carry the axe pick, and that's one tool that does the same role as two things, so two tools. And we're also going to grab the refined longbow here because that is also a very, very nice tool to actually have. And let's have a look here. We can now chop down the corrupted wood here because I have upgraded my axe a bit. And there we go, some corrupted wood for us to also use. Now the corrupted wood gives us health regen and maleficium resistance, which is nice, when we are attacking the bound, which in fact we are going to be doing now. Because, well, there are some bound creatures right over here. There is an infestation right up here. But you know what, before we do that, let's eat a bit here, just so that we are, as well off as we can be. And I do believe the heart is right up there. Yeah, indeed it is right up there. And we are being attacked by what I like to call the knight over here. And he is dead. But there will be more to come. I see some coming along from the left-hand side, the grenadier, I guess. But I do believe we have now destroyed the heart up there, the spawn point. So let's just get rid of the grenadier here, and whoever else is still around. Of course, now that we are in a new realm, there are also some new minerals to mine, and I do believe I see some copper up there, which will also be a very useful metal to actually mine. There we go, indeed, some copper. And you can kind of see a little bit of discoloration there, that bluish tinge we see there. That is known as the patina. The patina being the oxidized copper. So copper is this, obviously copper color, unless it comes into contact with oxygen, in which case it oxidizes, and then it results in a characteristic blue-green color. That's of course the color of the Statue of Liberty as well, and that is because, well, the Statue of Liberty is made of copper, and it has oxidized over time, so it has resulted in that blue-green patina forming over it. Now the copper does give you a ranged bonus, so it will be very useful to use it in the ranged weapons that we are going to be crafting. And then we also have a new tree over here. Apart from the corrupted trees, we also have this one right over here. So let's have a look and see what it is. It has this very, very gnarly trunk. It also has a bit of green in there. And I wonder whether the green here isn't perhaps algae growing in it, or perhaps moss growing on the trunk here. If it is moss, this is most likely a commensalistic relationship, where the tree isn't affected by the interaction with the moss, whereas the moss is positively affected by the presence of the tree, because it gets a nice place to grow. Perhaps the grooves of the trunk here actually result in water as it rains, water trickling down and being channeled along these furrows in the bark, and that's a great spot then for the moss to grow, because it's a nice moist environment. If it is algae, then it most likely is more of a mutualistic relationship where both parties benefit from that interaction. And I'm guessing then if it is algae, perhaps it's actually fused to some extent with a tree. It's actually growing inside the bark here. And very similar to what we have with coral, for example, on Earth, the zooxanthellae, which are microscopic photosynthetic organisms living within the coral polyps. And those zooxanthellae, they photosynthesize and they provide the coral, and also giant clams that they have an association with. They provide those organisms with sugars, which they then don't have to produce themselves. Let's just see, what timber have we got here? This is ribbon wood. Okay, it makes sense. Let's see, ribbon wood here is nice for melee damage and injury resistance. Okay, we're just going to chop out one more. We're going to leave the rest. We're not going to go crazy here, and we're also not going to cut out the tree trunks. I would like to come back later, and I do believe if we have a look at magic here, there we go, we can get regrowth. Now we can't get regrowth yet, we don't have enough essences yet, but regrowth here will allow us to actually regrow these tree trunks, so they regrow. So it is a bit more sustainable harvesting. Oh, and this is a nice big tree. Okay, I'm definitely not going to chop out this tree. It's bigger than any of the other trees, indicating that it most likely is a very, very, very old specimen. You know what, this reminds me of the American chestnut trees, where there are only a handful of old individuals left that were not taken out by the blight that was introduced with the Japanese chestnuts. So in America, the chestnuts, the American chestnuts, used to be very, very, very common. And then when the chestnut blight was introduced, they had no resistance to it, because they didn't evolve in the presence of that blight. Whereas the introduced chestnut species evolved with that blight, they were resistant to it, and they weren't affected by it as much. And only a handful of American chestnut trees survived the onslaught of that blight, of that fungus. And, you know, that one big old tree there, kind of, to me, looks very similar to what you find with the American chestnuts, where there's this one old tree and the rest are all either dead or are stunted, nowhere near what they should be, never reaching a flowering and fruiting stage either. Anyway, that is a discussion for another day. I'm going to craft myself a better bow quickly, and I'll be back in a bit. Alright, now I do have my new bow, and I've got a few other things unlocked as well. But I think this is where we're actually going to call it a day for now, everybody. Next time we'll look a little bit more at infestations by fungi, and how it affects the trees, for example, that they infect. And then also we'll take out some of the bound in the area and have a look at some of the creatures we also encounter. I will, of course, in the meantime be making the spyglass, which will hopefully also help us to look at them from a distance. Of course, on Friday there'll also be another episode of Enshrouded coming out as well, and I'll be playing a bit as an ecologist, running around in the world of Ember Vale, and hopefully we'll also encounter some water in there with the latest update. Of course, if you've got any questions or comments or tips, please drop them down in the comments below, and I'll be happy to have a look at them and reply as best I can. And until next time, everybody, stay safe. I'll see you all soon. Cheers!